One of the most common visuals of an adventure story is that of a lone hero standing against a force of overwhelming evil. There's just something inspiring about a single person taking a stand when all hope seems lost. A viewer or reader forms a bond with that person and grows with them as they overcome all odds with little or no help. It drives us to conquer our own challenges, face our own fears, and learn how we can individually take on whatever comes our way. Life, however, doesn't exist in a vacuum. Our daily experiences constantly involve other people, each one trying to handle their own challenges and fears. When your goals intersect with theirs, how do you handle it? Will you insist on going your own way? Fall in line with their plans? Or maybe learn to work together? Some burdens may be too heavy to bear alone. Some objectives may be just out of your reach. Sometimes your own strength, mind, or skills may just not be enough to handle the problem in front of you. When those times come, will you hold stubbornly to your own failing strength? Or will you make the brave, even heroic choice to reach out for a friendly hand and learn how a team can accomplish what one person simply cannot? With every newly released game system, two priorities take precedence. First, demonstrate the various technical capabilities that the new system possesses. Second, entice prospective gamers with games that encourage them to buy the new system. When the Game Boy Advance was introduced in 2001, Nintendo fulfilled these priorities by re-releasing A Link to the Past for the new system. In addition to being able to play full SNES titles on a handheld console, Nintendo displayed the GBA's capabilities by attaching to the game an additional adventure that was designed to be an exclusive multiplayer game. As the link cables were designed to allow a maximum of 4 players, the attached game was dubbed Four Swords. The plot of Four Swords is pretty similar to most of the Zelda franchise. An evil villain, in this case a wind sorcerer named Vati, is wreaking havoc in Hyrule, kidnaps Princess Zelda, and the only way to seal this evil away is with a sacred sword. The sword, however, is unique in that it splits the bearer into 4 identical copies, each with the same sword and ultimate goal, but able to move and act independent of each other. Through communication and cooperative gameplay, those who take up the Four Sword eventually gain access to the realm of the heavens where Vati lurks, and by defeating him, seal him away in the Four Sword. There's a bit of a problem with this plan, though. Not with the gameplay, but with logistics. Anyone wanting to play the game needed friends who each owned their own Game Boy Advance, their own copy of the Four Swords game, and enough link cables between them to create a single playable unit. As gamers in the early 2000s were still mostly young and lacking in personal funds, many of them somewhat reclusive, such a task proved difficult at best. Consequently, only a relatively small percentage of Zelda adventurers got to truly experience that quest to its end. 2 years later, following the release of Wind Waker, Nintendo again used The Legend of Zelda to showcase their hardware, this time displaying the GameCube's ability to connect with the Game Boy Advance to create another 4-person adventure. By implementing both the GBA's personal screen and the GameCube's TV hookup, Nintendo hoped to create a game that was both an individual adventure and a team effort to save Hyrule, without requiring the usual split-screen format of most multiplayer games. The adventure was titled simply Four Swords Adventures. Unfortunately, 2 years isn't a great deal of time, and now the creation of a full 4-person adventure required not just 4 Game Boy Advance systems, but 4 GameCube to GBA cables. Accessory hardware is not cheap. Left to similar requirements as before, this would end up as another Zelda adventure that many would just not have enough rupees to fully enjoy. Thankfully, Nintendo learned somewhat from their previous experience, and added a single-player option to this adventure, allowing anyone to learn how to manage not 1, but all 4 copies of the legendary hero. Actually, 4 might technically be a miscount. The game opens to an ominous darkness looming over Hyrule, prompting Princess Zelda to check on Vati's seal within the Four Sword. Taking you along as a bodyguard, the maidens guarding the shrine unlock the door, and are unexpected doppelganger. Shadow Link's return quickly results in the capture of all of the maidens and the princess, driving you to give chase into the Four-Sword Shrine. Left with no other option, the Four-Sword is drawn, creating all 4 potential players, and unleashing the evil you knew was lurking beneath the seal. From here, control is given to the players, and any multiplayer experience starts off immediately. But for those players unable to have a 4-man roster, the question is readily apparent. How in the world am I going to deal with 4 separate characters? Switching between 2 characters was difficult enough. 4 would be next to impossible. Am I just going to be playing follow the leader the whole time? The second screen provides the answer, as an old man and his grandchildren instruct you in formations, different ways of organizing your team in order to uniformly tackle an obstacle. There's nothing in-depth or complex about these formations, just 4 basic shapes to line up all 4 links. But when used effectively, your team can end up doing a lot more than just lifting logs. Each formation provides different functions for your group, allowing them to push, pull, and attack with uniform precision and power. While control of each individual link is still possible and needed, only together can you truly stand against the armies that you face. And we are talking literal armies. The number of enemies that stand in your way would actually be really impressive if they weren't all trying to kill you. From masses of Octoroks to full platoons of soldiers, you will be amazed and almost overwhelmed by how many foes you will face at one time. The tough single opponents and bosses of course have their time against you, but you're just as likely to suddenly face a mob of enemies pouring out of holes in the wall. Such moments make you happy to use whatever tools you have at your disposal. The only problem is that you don't have much choice in the matter. In a surprising twist from the normal Zelda formula, you have no item inventory whatsoever. Instead, pedestals throughout Hyrule hold your potential items, and you are permitted to carry one, and only one, at any time. In a multiplayer game, having players wielding different items allows for increased team building and strategy, assuring that every member can contribute to the party's success. For single players, the restricted item slot adds a level of problem solving to your adventure by forcing you to both find items and keep track of their locations. This can either streamline a level or force you to run around in circles looking for that one item needed to continue the quest. Regardless of what items and keys are needed for an area, every location has a single unifying element that is constant throughout Hyrule. Unlike the Master Sword's endless supply of divine light, the Fourth Sword, for some reason, loses its mystical energy regularly, requiring repeated replenishment in order to eliminate Vati's grip on the land. This is accomplished with a set of jewels called Force Gems, which have somehow overrun the land and completely replaced rupees as the items hiding under every bush, rock, crevice, and pot in Hyrule. For single players, the insane quantities of Force Gems seems completely unnecessary, as only 2,000 are needed in any area to power up the Force Sword. But for multiplayer gamers, these triangles suddenly become the most important things on the planet. For the only force that can overcome the drive to save Hyrule is the spirit of competition. Compounding the hassle of trying to coordinate efforts over puzzles and enemies is the constant battle amongst each other to see who can collect the most Force Gems, kill the most enemies, really just be the best hero. It doesn't actually do anything for you in-game, but the spirit of competition is often enough to keep anyone pushing towards a goal. That drive to compete is not just powerful, it's essential. Because there isn't much else in the game with a strong enough hook to keep players engaged. The game's story is about as bare bones as you can get, with brief introductions, simple plot lines, and an overall story arc that lacks any genuine depth. While pretty much every Zelda game follows a story, Four Swords takes this very literally, utilizing actual chapters and levels to create the most linear game possible. Each chapter follows the same 3-level format, ending with the Maiden's Rescue. You can generally expect at least one encounter with Dark Link in every level, And anytime a high-value force gem pops up, you can bet your sword that Tingle's gonna come floating in after it. The supposed twist midway through the game isn't all that much of a surprise either. Wandering through a freshly darkened Lost Woods reveals a host of Deku Scrubs, with not Vati, but Ganon on their worshipping lips. From then on, the supposed main villain of the Four Swords games takes an immediate backseat to the series' longtime Demon King. The game tries to remind you that Vati's still a threat, and you do get to battle him eventually, but it doesn't take much to figure out who is really waiting at the end of the journey. It seems rather lazy, just throwing Ganon into a story that he has no real purpose being in. With a layout as simple as this, you'd think it wouldn't be too hard to put in something at least a little less predictable. But despite the wealth of stories and world building we've had over the years, Nintendo has never actually used storytelling as a focal point in the Zelda universe. Instead, they focus on gameplay with the technology available. And in that, this Tale of the Four Sword excels. Remember that the first Four Swords game was nothing more than an add-on, a bonus for those who purchased A Link to the Past for the Game Boy Advance. Most who would pick up Four Swords Adventures would be familiar with the original Four Swords, and the SNES game it was attached to. The system that Four Swords Adventures is played on, the GameCube, had already had the Wind Waker for the past couple of years. Nearly anyone who picked up this game would have at least a basic knowledge of what Zelda has, and most of them would be longtime fans. Fans who had shared their adventures with their friends, exchanging hints, theories, and fantasies about a world they had come to love, and maybe even taken others along so they could see for themselves. With Four Swords Adventures, players finally got to bring their friends with them on an adventure, and the game took that longing into special consideration. The environment and gameplay mirrors A Link to the Past, using many of its enemies and locations. Then, sprinkled in that environment is an entourage of well-known faces from Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and especially Wind Waker, letting adventurers face familiar foes with their friends. The items are all tools any veteran Zelda adventurer would be accustomed to, and the overarching quest reflects Ocarina of Time and especially A Link to the Past to near completion. It's not a grand, innovative plunge into something new. It's a reminder of what makes Zelda so great. For the individual, it's a trip down memory lane, revisiting the people and places that made their many adventures in Hyrule so memorable. For the team, it's an opportunity to travel and battle together, facing those memories with new perspective and a group of friends at your side. Each chapter and episode spaced out so every member can be there for the entire adventure. Nearly all of Zelda is focused on the individual journey, the hero's development from a fledgling chosen one to the champion who defends the land from evil. It's through the hero's many trials that such development takes place. But one can only face so many trials on their own. The full development of a hero, and each person, can only come from interacting with others, seeing new perspectives, trying different methods, and ultimately coming to know both who is being saved, and sometimes who you are saving it with. For in so many situations, a single person just isn't enough to face the multitude of challenges that stand before you. It takes all kinds. Some you may not necessarily want to know, others you couldn't possibly imagine life without. With the blade returned, and the princess and the hero returning home, there remains with them both the tragedy they averted and the lessons they have learned. For through time and rebirth they will work together again, as they always have. The roles may change, and the companions may differ, but knowing how to work with others remains a lifelong skill, and a force that can overcome all, as shown to us here by the power of the Four Sword. Thanks everyone for joining the party in Four Swords Adventures. It's a streamlined adventure, but there's still much to talk about. I'd enjoy hearing about your favorite moments, both in-game and with your friends. Again, a big thanks to Sweetie Senpai, Maximus, Sensuke, and Blackstar for joining me on this adventure. If any of you want to see our journey, you can find a link in the description below. And if you want to see my other tributes for the Zelda series, that playlist is down there as well. If you want to hang around and see what happens next, please subscribe so you'll know when we set out again. Join us next time as our adventure reaches new heights and we take on challenges big and small in The Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap. See you soon.